that reflects years or months of in-depth introspection about our sector. And we've come to a point where we've made wonderful recommendations for us and for our peers who are not here. Recommendations that must, or we have to act upon these recommendations to ensure that we have the change we want, or we are describing for ourselves the ideal state in our civil society sector. Of course, it is important when we take up that mantra of taking up these recommendations, we need to work with our colleagues and work with them along this journey. That is why this session is very, very important. All about our organizations, how to bring our colleagues on this journey. Driving change on an organizational scale can seem like an insurmountable task. And of course, our able Theo Sowa from Accra, Ghana, and Matt Reeves from Kenya will be exchanging with us on the possibilities that exist to drive change from an organizational perspective, leaning from their experiences and what they've tested out in some way. However, it comes with various risks, the attempt to drive change at an organizational level. And these various risks need to be considered. And of course, it also has to come with different agendas that have to be taken into account. This session brings in pioneers in organizational transformation to share their learnings as to how to create safe spaces of mutuality, cooperation, and creativity where diverse colleagues can come together on an equal footing to explore and address challenging issues. Of course, as we will be exchanging with them, feel free if you have perspectives, you can ask in the chat or you can raise them in the chat and we will create a dedicated space where we will interrogate this further amongst our peers within this space. Colleagues, let us get to know the two formidable panelists who will be exchanging with us this afternoon, morning or evening, depending on where you are. First of all, we have Theo Sowa, who was born in Ghana, the country of the great Pan-Africanist Kwame Nkrumah. Theo Sowa has lived and worked in many countries in Africa, Europe, and North America. Her work includes advisory roles to African and other international women's rights, children's rights, and justice activists and leaders, as well as policy development and advocacy in a range of national and international organizations and agencies. Theo was the Chief Executive Officer of the African Women's Development Fund from 2011 until December 2020. Thank you so much for the great job you did with that organization. I must say that because you deserve that all the time. Currently, she is co-chair of the Equality Fund, member of the Stephen Lewis Foundation's African Advisory Board, patron of Evidence for Development, and a board member of the UBS Optimus Foundation, the Gracia Machela Trust, and the Open Society Initiative for West Africa. Theo, good afternoon, and we are happy to have you with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Jim. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And complementing Theo in this discussion is none other than Matt Reeves, who lives in Nairobi, Kenya at the moment with his lovely family. He loves to spend time outdoors hiking, running, exploring, and mountain biking. He also loves to be immersed in a good story and sometimes writes his own stories. And I tell you, the experience that Matt is bringing on board this session is one of those journeys that he's transforming into a story you would love to hear. Matt works on civil society strengthening with a large global foundation. He believes that international development organizations should be magical places to work. He is concerned that frequently they are not, and he's exploring what we can do about that with such a beautiful, knowledge about who Matt is. Matt, we are very, very happy to have you here with us. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Great, great. So, colleagues, here we are. And to kickstart this conversation, we would want to, interact with you and gain your perspectives on a particular topical issue. Looking at your respective organizations, how ready is your organization for this transformation? We will be having this question on Mentimeter for us to share our perspectives on this particular issue. I'll invite my wonderful tech colleagues, Tor, to share a Mentimeter link. Thank you, David, for doing that. A link has been shared in the chat. Kindly click on it, read the question, and share your perspectives on that. And we are going to see how the responses are, being populated on Mentimeter. Again, how ready is your organization for this transformation we are talking about? Somewhat ready is taking the lead. I know what that means. Not sure. I like that. Not ready at all. It is possible. Yeah. Can we have the results on the screen, please? I hope we will be having a trend shift when the results are projected. Very ready. I like that. Somewhat ready is competing with very ready, but I'm happy that very ready is championing, in terms of responses, as we hope to have more champions of this transformation agenda in the months ahead, so that collectively we can learn from experiences that we'll be gathering along this journey. So here we are. How ready is your organization for this transformation? And we can see that many of our organizations, we think, are somewhat ready. A good indication. Very ready. Of course, wonderful. Not ready at all. It is still wonderful because your experiences are needed to enable us to really know what's needed to ensure that our organizations are all ready. And some of us are not really, really sure. I thank you very much, David. It's really good to see the optimism in the room. And of course, I'm sure that will definitely translate into some action in the months to come. Thank you very much, David and Tua, for helping us to visualize what everyone in the room currently thinks about our preparedness for the transformation. And of course, I would like to invite Matt. You have had an experience to think through what it really means to drive organizational transformation, organizational change, and you've piloted something very wonderful. Can you take us through that journey? What did you test? What did you experience? What lessons can we derive from that? Matt?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. I hope everyone can see my screen. Yeah, so I wanted to begin just briefly by situating myself. So I am a middle-aged, English-speaking, cisgender, white man from the UK, working in an expatriate role in a large multinational development organization here in Kenya. I was educated at the University of Bristol in the UK, which I have recently learned received 85% of its initial funding from families who grew rich from wealth from the transatlantic slave trade. And I make my home in Kenya, which within the last 70 years, within my parents' lifetime, was colonized and brutalized by the country that I was born in. I've given a lot of thought, and I continue to give a lot of thought, to whether I should continue to be working within this space. But for the time being, I've chosen to remain and to use my personal power to build power together with others. And one way I've been trying to do that is in response to an organizational culture challenge within the organization that I work. In speaking with my colleagues, we realized that we were seeing misunderstandings between teams, unhealthy power dynamics, challenges going unaddressed, unrealistic expectations, and good people burning out through stress. Perhaps these are challenges that you recognize from your organizations as well. We've certainly been hearing about a number of them over the course of the last few days. In response, we convened a group of 13 colleagues representing 9 countries to explore issues around working better together within the organization. It happened during the COVID pandemic, and so we met online 8 times over a 4-month period and decided as a group on the questions that we wanted to focus on. In between sessions, we reflected individually, we chatted in pairs, and we tried to apply some of the things we were learning together. In our first session, we shared metaphors as a way of introducing ourselves and revealing how we see ourselves at work. We discovered that many of us saw ourselves as connectors, and you'll see here an image of a bridge, an electrician, and a weaver. Also, many of us felt overwhelmed with multitasking, and you'll see here the six-armed handyman, the 8-armed octopus, and the pile of hats from someone who felt they had so many different hats that they were wearing in their role. In our second session, we explored power dynamics, and we used this framing that you see here that was adapted from Gender at Work, which looks at informal and formal power at the individual and organizational level. And each of us had the opportunity to walk in the shoes of one other colleague and understand their positionality and their power. As someone whose shoes were walked in by another colleague, I found that it was really powerful to be heard and understood, and that was a reflection that came out across the group. In a third session, we built models from items that we scavenged from our homes and offices to explore how our organization works. And in this image here, you can see the complex web of relationships in our organization represented by that pile of pipe cleaners at the front. And then you can see these little balls underneath the pipe cleaners, and there are people that get lost within that complex web of relationships. But you can also see there a pot of glitter, which shows that sometimes within our complex relationships that are hard to navigate, magic can happen. We used role play as a mechanism to explore our aversion to conflict, each taking on the roles of others in the organization whose motivations that we might find we question in our day-to-day work. In an exceptionally powerful session, we used body sculptures. This is an activity we found from Theory U to explore our embodied reaction to burnout, and then to explore what freedom from burnout might feel like. We also wrote and shared fairy tales to articulate our high point and our low point experiences of collaboration across teams. And we found that sharing in fairy tales rather than just telling each other was a way that we could get a little bit deeper and maybe express things that we might struggle to otherwise. And we shared and collaged photographs that represent how we feel about our organization. At the end of working better together, at the end of the 4 months, we came back together as a group to think about what we'd learned. And these are some participant quotes from that time. Participants felt we created a safe space for honest discussion, that the creative approaches that we'd used had challenged us to think in new ways and go deeper than we might do otherwise. And that together we were maybe starting a cultural revolution. We also discussed what had changed for us as a result of the Working Better Together group. And we spoke about how we felt greater agency and ability to influence our lives, our working lives, and some aspects of the organization around us. And we saw shifts in the way we felt about and interacted with our colleagues, particularly those in different teams than us. Together, we worked to write up and present the insights and recommendations that came out of the group for leadership. And we shared a paper with these 6 insight areas around relationships, power, trust, burnout, diversity and inclusion, and conflict aversion. And the response within the organization was quite positive. And in fact, next week, we're beginning a new group using a similar approach, but this time with 24 different colleagues representing 15 countries. And on top of that, 2 of our country officers are planning to use these approaches in person with their teams to explore and strengthen organizational culture at the country level. I'd like to end by sharing a couple of thoughts about what excites me, but also what concerns me about this initiative. I'm excited, really excited about the power of creative approaches to shift power dynamics and facilitate new types of conversation within our organizations. I'm also excited about the changes in agency, mindsets, and power and relationships that our colleagues spoke about, which seem to hint at kind of below the water level systems change if we're thinking about kind of an iceberg model of systems change. On the other hand, I'm concerned that as this work potentially becomes institutionalized, it could also become co-opted and used in kind of more traditional ways and maybe less disruptive ways than our original group intended. The point is to use kind of creative and participatory approach and then see what emerges together, not to use role play to fill out a project monitoring form. A second concern is that everything I described happened in English, which was privileging native speakers of English like myself. My hope is that over time, as our country teams take this up, they're able to do so in their own languages and kind of move away from the hegemony of English. And that's what I want to share today. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Matt, for that very wonderful experience that you've shared. You know, as you were going through that journey, I was just trying to have a picture, you know, of myself in my organization and trying to test out one of these within seconds. And it made me to really live in a very active moment of bubbles and seeing some kind of great realizations in the end. And I hope many of our organizations that are following, you know, this particular session will, you know, come back to it and in a step-by-step manner, try to test this out in the very near future. Thank you once again.
Jim, just briefly, I think one thing is, you know, I'm not presenting a blueprint. I'm just sharing kind of what we did, and certainly wouldn't expect anyone, you know, every organization is different, right? But maybe there are some ideas here that spark thinking that people would like to have conversations around.
Great. Thank you once again. And it's always good to start from somewhere. And thank you for sharing that experience. Theo, you know, listening to Matt and beyond that, you know, given the aspirations we all hold, particularly from the poll, there was quite a high level of or high sense of optimism that we are somewhat ready already, you know, to drive the change, you know, within our organizations and carry our colleagues along. You know, how can organizations possibly bring these aspirations to life? Particularly given that within our organizations, there are certain, you know, structures in place, cultural practices in place that, you know, do exist, and we somehow subconsciously or consciously live by them. How can we really bring these aspirations to life? Theo?
Hi, okay, so Jim, I'm going to try to be brief to give us all a bit more time to ask questions and discuss. But I did notice in the chat how people were talking about the level of optimism, and someone else actually said that given that the people attending this meeting had been given permission to do so by their organizations, it's more likely that there would be a high level of optimism. And I would expect that. I would expect that the people attending this meeting are doing so out of an interest in making these transformations happen, and that they're hoping that their organization is ready or somewhat ready. Honestly, most organizations that I have been involved with are not homogenous. There's never been an organization that I have worked with, either sitting on the board or working in the organization, where everybody has been ready or everybody has not been ready. It's always a spectrum. And I think that's really important when we start looking at transformation, because if we go into a transformation thinking everybody's here for it, everybody's ready, we're going to get deeply disappointed and quite disillusioned when you come across the people who are obstructing the change that you want to see. And vice versa. If you go in thinking that nobody is with you and you're on a mission on your own to change this organization and the world, you're actually quite likely to alienate people who otherwise were thinking that they were your partner in that change. So one of the things I think we really need to be careful about is that when we're looking at transformation, organizational transformation, we need to really listen very, very carefully to our colleagues, to people that we have relationships with, either individual or organizational, internal and external, to really assess where the strengths and weaknesses, the readiness and the obstructions are. And very often I've found that obstructions come in places that I least expected. But also that can come with support. People and structures that you might not have thought would support a radical change can be very surprising. So what I wanted to say today was how important it was for us to really be contextual about how we make transformation happen. Every organization is in a different place on this journey, and it's a long journey. Some people have been on it for a long time and feel like they've gotten nowhere. Other people have been on it for 5 seconds and think that they've changed the world, and then they look around the corner and see that there's a long road still ahead. So I think we need to be very contextual about this. And speaking as an African feminist, one of the things that I've learned is it's not just about being contextual, it's about being intersectional and holistic about the transformation we want to make. Because otherwise, we will not change the whole of our organization. And otherwise, we will not change our relationships with the people that we work with. There are so many elements in transformation. And we really need to make sure that we are looking holistically at this, because if we don't, we can hold ourselves back. So one of the examples that I wanted to give was having worked in feminist organizations where we've really had deep work around the values of feminism, around the importance of, tearing down systems of discrimination for everyone, tearing down all inequalities. And we can be really strong about this, really strong about the rhetoric. And then we work in an organization and realize actually we're replicating the very things that we're trying to work against in our wider work. And it can be really hard to acknowledge that when the values are so close to your heart. And one of the things that I learned was how important it was for us to continue working on individual change, awareness, transformation, as well as the really boring organizational stuff. So yes, we can be feminist and have participatory grant making, but if we end up with a tender process that actually replicates the power structures that exist now, then we're actively working against the transformation that we're having in other areas. And there are ways, and we need to really push and get some of the people who will often say risk, we can't do this because it messes up our risk framework, or we can't do this because we need certain financial guarantees. Those are the very people that we need to work with to get them to say, if this is our value, how do we transform the finance system so that you have what you need to guarantee your processes, but at the same time, you are working to actually promote the core transformational values that we're working with. So I think that's really important, that this has got to be systematic. And if it's not systematic, then we end up at danger of being ad hoc, or at worst, seeming to not the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, and vice versa. So just to finish off, because I know I'm taking up too much time, I wanted to say that I think people need to think about three things. Intentionality, because if we do not have the intent to make transformation happen, it will not happen. And that intention needs to run through everything that we do within the organization. And intentionality is not enough on its own. You can have great intent, but not have changed organizationally, which means that you end up almost being ad hoc in the change that we have. But if we have intent, and if we intentionally listen, if we intentionally analyze, if we intentionally plan, then at least we have a direction of travel that we're going in. And that's for both internal and external relationships, and is really important to underline all of our work. The second thing is leadership. We talk about shifting power, and then in our organizations, we talk about leadership as if it's only the CEO, the leadership team, and maybe the board. We are all leaders. We all have power. And if we cannot recognize the power in each of us individually within our organization, in whatever role that we're playing, we will never recognize the power and the leadership in the people that we work with, in the people that actually we are accountable to. So we really need to shift this mindset about power being a zero-sum game and power somehow being top down within our organizations. And when each person in the organization recognizes their leadership, that's when transformation can be amazing. And then finally, just to say, please, people, do something. There is nothing worse than people sitting back and saying, oh, I want to shift this power. Oh, there's such inequality in the world. Oh, we want to decolonize our thinking. And then spending the whole time being introspective and doing nothing. I know it isn't easy. It really isn't. And nothing that we do will ever be perfect. We're talking about dismantling a system that has been there for generations. It will take time and effort, but we have to start somewhere. And some people have started. Do not let the idea of the perfect action stop you from changing things now. That's not to say you don't think about it, that you don't plan, that you don't listen, that you don't collaborate. You must do all of those things, but please take action. If we sit and introspect, we can introspect for years. And when in 20 years we come up with the perfect plan, the world would have left us behind. Jim, back to you.
Thank you, Theo. I was assimilating the element about taking action. And, I think we really needed that message at this particular time. Thank you so much, Theo. Intentionality, leadership and taking action. Very, very key ingredients to ensure that we drive the transformation we are looking for. I just want to take one quick question. And colleagues, thank you very much for, the brilliant submissions that are being shared, in the chat. And this question is to you, Matt, very quickly. It's from Barbara. She says, thanks, Matt. Really nice to hear more about this journey and your reflections. Maybe you mentioned it, but how did the facilitation work?
Sure. Thanks, Jim and Barbara. The facilitation group rotated around the group, so there were 13 of us, and we each took turns to facilitate one session with a partner.
Okay, thank you very much for that wonderful one. And we are getting into our breakout rooms shortly. I'm just inviting colleagues to add to your name your language of preference, as that will facilitate the apportioning of everyone here into specific breakout rooms. There is a comment here from Mustafa Fai. Ce que vous avez dit a des échos dans ce laboratoire d'idées, d'expériences ou de vécu. Merci beaucoup, Matt. Je pense que vous comprenez un peu de français, Matt. Merci beaucoup. C'est très pertinent votre vécu. Basically appreciating your shared experience, the experience you shared with us, Matt. Thank you very much. At this moment, I'll be inviting our tech colleagues to, put us into groups. And it's basically time for us to take this experience shared by Matt and the ideas and tips shared by Theo, into our breakout rooms and look more keenly within. But beyond, as we look within, it's important to also start reflecting on what little thing we need to do, as we step out from here and we take action. So we are going to move into breakout rooms to basically discuss two questions. First, what is one thing you've learned about organizational change that works? The questions will be dropped in the chat shortly. And secondly, where are you getting stuck with organizational change right now? If you have some experiences around this, it will be good to share with peers, so that we can start anticipating, for those of us who have not gotten up to that extent yet, on what are some possible barriers we should be looking forward to as we work in a piecemeal fashion towards the change we want. So we'll be moving into the breakout rooms, basically for the next 10 to 15 minutes to discuss what is one thing you've learned about organizational change that works, and also where are you getting stuck with organizational change right now. And in a short while, my colleague Tor and David will be sending us into the respective breakout rooms. Your experiences are what will make this session even more enriching. So feel free to discuss elaborately in our small groups. And when we come back, you can delegate someone to share, the perspectives from your respective group, or you just want to drop them in the chat. And we are going to, discuss some of the points that will be emerging from our groups. Thank you all so much for your patience as we move into the groups slowly but surely. And again, just the questions that we'll be discussing. What is one thing you've learned about organizational change that works? Where are you getting stuck with organization? Okay. Don't worry, Mustafa Savali. Thank you very much, colleagues, for rejoining the session. I'm sure we had very interesting discussions in our respective groups. Once again, thank you, Matt and Theo, for, triggering these reflections to the extent that you did, as it actually inspired, that continuum of thinking in our respective groups. I will just want to, from our respective groups, can we just share in the chat, what are some of the key highlights that emerged as we discussed these two critical questions? And the questions, once again, just as a reminder for those who may be joining us now, we went into groups to discuss what is one thing you've learned about organizational change that works? And the second question, where are you getting stuck with organizational change right now? Thank you very much for sharing those in the chat, Tor. And maybe if any group rep wants to share, you can raise your hand and we can take one or two as the time permits. Meanwhile, other colleagues can equally share in the chat, what emerged as key highlights from the discussions in our groups or our respective groups. Any thoughts? Anyone who wants to share? I am tempted to scroll through the participants list and just call on any favorite by name. Oh, great. Thank you very much, Charles. Maybe I can take you. Yes, Charles, please. Charles Van Dyke.
Yes. So we had a wonderful group, and Faye Anderson was with me and Eno and Emmett. and she came up with a really beautiful quote that I want to read. And I love it. She said, when the people with power are willing to let go of their positional power, but focus on unleashing their empowering power, change happens.
Please, Charles, can you come again with that very slowly?
Okay. She said, when the people with power are willing to let go of their positional power, but focus on their empowering power, change happens within organizations.
Yes, this is it. I think our communications team should capture that. It should go on social media in the next couple of times. Thank you very much, Charles and group members. Excellent. For that. Brianna shares in the chat some of the key points that are working, having a healing and trauma approach to change and what can come up for people as we navigate this. Involving everyone is key. Bringing people together to talk about real experiences. Thank you very much, Brianna. We have Deborah Willick. She challenges at times showing up as rivals within and between organizations rather than collaborators. Need new ways of leadership where collaboration is rewarded. And somehow they can tap into the empowering power demonstrated by leaders, as Charles shared. Brianna added, where we are stuck, being afraid, including to pull the armor down, being afraid to take the first step, fear of the majority reacting in ways that will be harmful for the minority groups. Focus on the high-level policies and structures without looking at the individual. Thank you once again, Brianna, for those insights from your group. Mamata Dash says, using creative approaches to understand power and shifts. Josman says, how to collaborate together to collaborate and contribute fairly in our initiatives is a challenge that requires preparing ourselves to facilitate process and share our wisdom to dialogue and assume complex contexts. Tosca says, what is working? Start based on what grantees, clients, primary constituents tell us in feedback. Not rely on change teams, but sense of urgency needs to be driven by critical mass. Thank you very much, Tosca, for that and your group members. Barbara Van says, some of the things that came out of our nice chat on what works, clear strategy, jointly developed, and comms, stamina, peers, resilience, bring in new people or move them around to other perspectives, authenticity and naming when values and practice are out of tune. Thank you very much. And thank you, Charles, for sharing that very powerful quote by Faye. Faye, with your permission, we will be sharing this on our social media platforms in the next couple of hours. I hope that is okay by you. Lassina Tal, et je vais parler maintenant en français. Je pense que le changement organisationnel doit se faire de temps en temps en tenant compte des contingences et des défis. Merci beaucoup pour votre perspective et pour les collaborateurs qui étaient avec vous dans votre groupe. Marish Priester says, what works? Starting with small things all over the organization, often very spontaneously, not wait for complete readiness, whatever that is. I think that really, brings back what Theo, emphasized on, start, no matter how small. Fire is recommended. Yes, Fire, we will be saving the chat and it will actually be uploaded on the Hoover platform where we can equally access the video recording of this session. Great. So, colleagues, thank you very much. There is another comment here from Mustafa Fay. Je suis impliqué dans une dynamique de changement en milieu académique canadien sur les enjeux de diversité, de discrimination, de responsabilité institutionnelle et de racisme systémique. Merci beaucoup, Faye, pour votre perspective. On pense qu'avec les différentes perspectives ou astuces qu'on est en train de partager ici, vous pouvez avoir quelques-uns que vous pourriez adapter pour appliquer dans votre contexte ou dans votre groupe pilote pour voir comment, quels résultats nous pourrions avoir. And thank you very much, colleagues, for continuously sharing these brilliant insights. At this moment, I would just want to, invite from these reactions that are coming, Phil and Matt, Phil, on the one hand, you've tried out something, had wonderful experiences and memories. And of course, you have a new direction moving forward. Phil, on the other hand, a rich experience, and you've brought some, key takeaways from that experience that we can build on. Looking at what has come out of the different groups, can you just quickly, just tell us one key thing that as we move forward, move out of this session and continue with the festival and in our work in the hours and days ahead, what is that one thing we should leave with from this session? Theo?
Okay, so I think that I'm going to go slightly sideways for you, Jim. There are a couple of things that have come out. I want to say to people, and Mustafa, I can understand your anger. And you know what? Anger can be a good tool and in actually making transformation happen. We just have to make sure that we're focusing our anger in ways that end up being constructive. So please never apologize for being angry. If it's angry about inequality, we should all be angry. But the thing that I really wanted to say to everyone, this is hard work. All of it is really hard work. Shifting power is hard because people very rarely want to give up the power that they already have. And because we live in a world that sees so much as a zero-sum game, it means that people think that if I change the way in which I use my power in a way that, as Faye said, is more empowering, that somehow you have lessened your power. Whereas I honestly believe that if all of us use our power well, we just expand the better use of power. But it is not easy because some people will not want to give that up. And if we sit back and think that people will volunteer to give up power and that we will change the world that way, it will not happen. So people, prepare yourself. It's a long journey. It's a big struggle. But I would want to end with two of my favorite feminist quotes. The first being, give me bread, but give me roses. And the second one being, what's the point of a revolution if we can't dance? There is joy in transforming inequality. There is joy in transforming our world. So you know what? Have some fun along the way. Don't make it all about self-beating and flagellation. Have some fun because you need the joy in order to keep going. Where, I come from Ghana. We dance. We tell stories and we dance. So enjoy yourself while you are making this transformation happen.
Thank you very much, Theo. And I'm actually going to take the fun bit as I complement it with what Mamata is saying in the chat. It's a long journey, but worth a journey to undertake with fun, of course. Matt, it would be good to hear from you one or two key takeaways that you can, recommend that we leave this session with. Matt?
I think there's some wonderful reflections in the chat. And so for anyone who's not had a chance to see what's come up as we've gone along, definitely go down, download it afterwards. One thing that I'm left thinking is, our organizations are us. We are our organizations, right? So if we want to create change in our organizations, who better to do it than us, right? And it is a long journey. There's a lot that needs to happen. There's a lot that is challenging. There's a lot that's not right. But it's also a journey that we can start taking the first steps on today. in terms of how we engage with our colleagues, in terms of how we think about folks in our organization that are frustrating us, or that we don't understand, or that we've not reached out to and spoken to, etc. So yeah, that's my kind of concluding. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Matt. Thank you so very much, Theo. And before we leave you, dear colleagues, there is a Mentimeter that is going to be shared in the chat. Kindly click on it. It's been shared. Kindly click on it and share with us what you have been inspired to do now. Of course, several clarion calls to, be the change we want to see. It is a long journey, but of course, a journey worth taking. There are elements of fun that we have to bring on board. Why not anger, but positive anger, transformative anger? So what are you inspired to do now after this session? Great. I can see the responses coming on. Start acting. Do something, even if it's small. Thank you so much. Pursue change without waiting for a perfect plan. Changement ou transformation. Keep it up. Lead with more empathy. Recommit to support organizations in this journey. It is worth it. Of course, keep going. Keep going. And greater support around me to help maintain this group's energy. Great. Participate in the festival network once it ends to meet and collaborate with organizations and people who pursue the same initiative. And of course, we can continue to do that on the Hoover platform, which is actually a space that will give us some time to network, to connect with, colleagues and peers that are within this group. Start the change now. There is no perfect time than now. It is time to act. The time is now. Wonderful colleagues. Thank you very much for, your brilliant input. And of course, I can see one. I've been waiting for that. For us to dance. If I knew that this was coming, I should have kept some lovely music for us to dance to it. But don't go away. We have the last session coming up, and there will be definitely some dancing in that session. Dear colleagues, at this moment, we just want to say a very big thank you to Matt Reeves and Theo Sowa for your brilliant, exposition and sharing with us. It has inspired us and has provoked our critical thinking around what we need to do to bring our colleagues on board this journey. And of course, the last responses we shared definitely show that there is even more enthusiasm to drive this change with our colleagues on board, or to bring our colleagues on board to drive the change we need. On that note, colleagues, thank you very much. Let us look forward to the closing session, one that you must not miss. I will be there. I know Matt will be there, and of course, Theo and David. What about you, dear colleagues? We invite you in the next couple of, there about 1 hour, 15 minutes to join the closing session, where we will be talking beyond Ringo, what next? And you don't want to miss. The speakers are great. Danny from Oxfam and Becky Moyo from the Witwatersrand University in South Africa. Thank you so much, colleagues, for sharing this session with us. And we look forward to continuing the discussion in the next session. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye for now. Au revoir, Mustafa, et merci beaucoup pour votre belle participation. Thank you very much. Bye. Tua and David, you're amazing. Thank you. I was calling for this on my mind, Thank you.
Tua has it. Jim, brilliant job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.